A robot just performed surgery completely on its own. No surgeon at the controls, 100% success rate, powered by the same AI behind ChatGPT. That's what the headlines say. And if you're a surgeon watching this, your reaction was probably somewhere between, "That's fascinating," and "That's terrifying." But before you start updating your CV, let's slow down, because the gap between what the media reported and what this research team actually accomplished is huge. Today, we're doing a full deep dive on SRT-H, the hierarchical surgical robot transformer out of Johns Hopkins. We're going to break down exactly how this system works, what it actually did and what it did not do, and what it realistically means for the future of your operating room. So let's go. If you're new here, welcome to SpeakMD. We evaluate medical technology through a single lens. Does this actually work in a real clinical environment? We don't do tech hype. We look at functionality, clinical impact, the legal implications, and workflow. And we do it from the perspective of practicing physicians seeing patients every day. Now, full disclosure, I have no financial relationship with the institutions, Intuitive Surgical, or any entity involved in this research. I'm looking at this purely as a surgeon evaluating technology that could fundamentally reshape our field. So the original paper was published in Science Robotics in July of 2025. It came out of the lab at Johns Hopkins, and within 48 hours of publication, it was everywhere. Mainstream news, social media, tech blogs. The problem is, most of these stories got the nuance completely wrong. And in surgery, of course, nuance is important. So let's start with the tech. First things first, this is not some futuristic robot built from scratch in a lab. SRT-H runs on the Vinci research kit. For those unfamiliar, this is basically a decommissioned, retired Vinci surgical system that Intuitive Surgical donates to universities for research through their Intuitive Foundation. It has been repurposed with open source electronics and software, so research can basically hack on it. So the physical robot, it's the same arms, the same instruments, the same basic setup that many of you already use every single week. That's actually an important point. They didn't need some exotic new hardware. They experimented with better software. Here's where it gets interesting. SRT-H uses a hierarchical two-level AI architecture. Think of it like a chief surgeon and a resident working together. At the top, you have this high-level language planner. This is a transformer model, the same type of architecture that powers large language models like ChatGPT. Its job is to look at the surgical field through the endoscope and the cameras, assess where the robot is in the procedure, and issue a language-based instruction, something like grasp the neck of the gallbladder or position the clip applier on the cystic duct. And then below that, you have the low-level action model. This takes that language instruction and translates it into actual robotic arm movements. So the interesting part is the high-level planner doesn't just issue a task or instruction and let the robot arm go. It also has a built-in self-correction mechanism. Every 3 seconds, it reassesses the surgical field and asks itself, is the robot in a suboptimal state? Did the last action go slightly off? If yes, it generates a corrective instruction, something like move the arm slightly to the right, or overrides the standard task flow that it had previously ordered. This is a big deal because in real surgery, nothing goes perfectly. Tissue slips, instruments don't grab cleanly, anatomy varies. The ability to detect and recover from small errors without human intervention is arguably more important than executing some perfect plan that you had laid out. So how did SRT-H learn to do all this? Pretty simple. It watched surgeons operate. The team recorded approximately 17 hours of human-performed cholecystectomies on pig cadaver tissue using the Vinci. They paired the visual data with language captions describing each particular step. The robot essentially studied those videos the way a surgical trainee might study operative footage, except that it was extracting the precise mapping between what the field looks like, what the instruction is, and what the hands need to do. After training, they tested it on 8 completely unseen gallbladder specimens. The robot had never seen these tissues before, and it completed the clipping and cutting phase of a lap chole, encompassing about 17 small subtasks, with a 100% success rate. No human touched the controls. One more thing, SRT-H also responds to voice commands. If a supervising surgeon says, move the right arm down, the robot adjusts and learns from that correction. Think of it like a verbal feedback during a case. This matters because even in a fully autonomous mode, there's a built-in mechanism for human steerability. All right, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the headlines. Robot performs surgery on its own for the first time, powered by ChatGPT. Let's unpack that. First, SRT-H is not ChatGPT. It uses the same type of architecture, a transformer, but it's a completely separate model trained specifically on surgical video data. Secondly, this was not a full surgery. The robot performed the clipping and cutting phase of a cholecystectomy. That is a critical step, but it is one phase of a multi-phase procedure. The initial dissection, the critical view of safety identification, the gallbladder extraction from the liver bed, those were not a part of this study. Third, and I think this is the big one, this was done ex vivo. The gallbladder tissue was removed from the pig cadavers and set up on a bench. There was no abdomen, there was no insufflation, no breathing, no bleeding, no adhesions from prior surgery, no anatomic variation that would make you stop and call a partner. I don't think I've scrubbed a lap chole since intern year, but the underlying idea that every surgery, no matter how routine, is different, and sometimes routine procedures can become very complex quickly. The researchers themselves are very clear about this. They call it step-level autonomy, not procedure level, not clinical level, step level. But that distinction kind of evaporated by the time it hit the Daily Mirror. This is actually one of the most interesting parts of the whole story. Science Robotics, the journal that published the paper, also published an editorial response raising concerns about the gap between the actual research and the media narrative. The editorial made a couple of really key points. First, they noted that classifying SRT-H level 4 autonomy, meaning high autonomy under supervision, is kind of debatable when the testing was done on the cadaver tissue outside of the body. Level 4 autonomy, by its own definition, implies that the system is practicing medicine under a doctor's supervision. Performing a pre-prepared task on a bench, however impressive, is not that. Second, they suggested that the near-term clinical value might not be full autonomy at all. Instead, they proposed kind of a surgical safety concept. Think of like advanced driver assistance systems for your car. But instead of these safety systems being for your car, they're for the operating room. Real-time collision avoidance, anatomical landmark warnings, safety checks for clip placement. The surgeon stays in control, but the robot provides kind of a safety net. Honestly, as a surgeon, that resonates with me much more than full autonomy. It's not about replacing surgeons. It's a robot to catch the things that I might miss at hour 6 after a long day. I really like the way the research team approached this. To their full credit, the team responded to the editorial and acknowledged that some media coverage overstated their work beyond their intention. But they also made an interesting point. They said that the hype can be positive because it draws more research into the field and accelerates progress. But as physicians, we also know that media hype in medicine has consequences. So if you're finding this breakdown useful and you want physician-first evaluations of the technologies that are actually going to affect your practice, hit the subscribe button. We're building a community of medical professionals who want the real story, not just the headline. Now, let's talk about what this means for the future of your operating room. Let's first zoom out. In surgical robotics, there's actually a well-established framework for levels of autonomy. This was published in Science Robotics all the way back in 2017. It goes from level 0, no autonomy, the robot is a pure tool, all the way up to level 5, full autonomy with no human needed. Right now, every FDA-cleared surgical robot on the market, your Vinci, your Hugo, your Vercius, they all operate at level 0. The surgeon controls every movement. The robot has zero decision-making authority. SRT-H in the lab setting demonstrated something in the range of level 3 to level 4. That is a massive leap, but it's a lab leap, not a clinical one. The gap between works on a bench with a cadaver tissue and cleared for use in a human patient is measured in years, if not decades, of regulatory, ethical, and technical work. And that again brings up the regulatory question that nobody is really talking about yet. The FDA has no established pathway for approving a fully autonomous surgical system. Every robotic system currently cleared is classified as a surgeon-controlled tool. If you wanted to bring SRT-H to market as an autonomous system, you would need an entirely new regulatory framework. It would have to cover not just device safety, but algorithmic transparency, liability assignment, training data validation, and real-time fail-safe protocols. So if you think about it, who is liable when an autonomous robot causes a bile duct injury? The hospital, the robot manufacturer, the AI training team, the surgeon who was supervising from across the room? Nobody has answered that question because nobody has had to yet. But this research puts us on a path where those answers become necessary. So the team has said that their next steps are to expand to more procedure types and eventually attempt a fully autonomous surgery from start to finish. That's their research trajectory, but I think the more realistic near-term impact, and the one that could genuinely improve patient outcomes, is the assistive model. Imagine a system that handles the tedious, repetitive portions of the case autonomously while the surgeon focuses on the critical decision-making. Autonomous suturing at the end of a case, autonomous camera positioning, automated clip placement once the surgeon has confirmed the critical view of safety. That's not science fiction, that's plausible within the next 5 to 10 years. And that would genuinely make a surgical practice smarter. Not by replacing the surgeon, but by reducing the cognitive load during the parts of a case where fatigue-related errors are most likely. So let me leave you with this thought. This is the first time we have seen a robot learn a complex multi-step surgical procedure from video and then execute it autonomously on realistic tissue. That is objectively remarkable. The researchers at Johns Hopkins deserve serious credit for pushing the field forward. But we have to hold two ideas in our heads at the same time. This is a genuine scientific milestone, and it is nowhere near ready for your patient. Both things are true. The history of surgical innovation is littered with technologies that were overpromised and underdelivered. It's also full of technologies that were initially dismissed and ended up transforming the field. Laparoscopic cholecystectomy itself was called a gimmick by many surgeons in the late 1980s. The Vinci was dismissed as an expensive toy. Both have become essentially the standard of care. So where does autonomous surgery land? I don't think anyone knows yet, but I do think that as surgeons, our job is not to fear this technology or to hype it. Our job is to understand it deeply enough to shape how it gets integrated. Because if we don't have a seat at the table, someone who has never held a scalpel will make those decisions for us. So that's the full breakdown on SRT-H, a legitimate, impressive piece of research that got totally distorted by a media cycle that doesn't understand the difference between ex vivo and in vivo. They also missed the nuance between a step-level autonomy increase and a robot replacing your surgeon. If you found this useful, share it with a colleague. If you disagree with anything I said, drop it in the comments. That's how we all get smarter. If you enjoyed this video, you may want to check out some of my other videos like this one about Doximity's AI platform, or this one over here about Doctronic, a company that is trying to automate prescription refills for doctors using AI without any doctor supervision. Thank you so much for watching. I know your time is valuable. Have a great day.